Good evening, folks. On February 12th, 2024, the African National Congress, the ruling party in South Africa, once again carrying the water for its fellow travelers, sought to undermine Israel with a letter to the International Court of Justice asking the court to order Israel to leave itself at the mercy of Hamas. Jerusalem responded with its own observations in a letter to the ICJ on February 15th. The International Court of Justice on Friday, February 16th, said that it does not see the need for additional emergency measures to protect Palestinians following Israel's Rafah offensive. Now, this decision comes after South Africa asked the court to consider whether Israel's plan to extend its offensive in Gaza into Rafah requires additional emergency measures to protect Palestinians. Perhaps coincidentally or not, Iran's president will reportedly visit Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa on February 27th. Israel said the emergency measures issued by the ICJ last month already cover the situation of hostilities in Gaza as a whole. And that's according to documents that the court released on Thursday. For its part, Israel asked the World Court to reject South Africa's request, which was filed on Tuesday. In that filing, South Africa said that there had been a significant development since the court's January ruling, meaning that Netanyahu's offensive in Rafah had been announced. Now, last month, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to do all it can to prevent the deaths of Palestinian civilians after South Africa, a longtime supporter of Palestinians, accused the IDF of genocide in Gaza. Now, of course, Israel is already bound by international treaty, the Geneva Conventions, and the law of land warfare to do exactly what the ICJ directed. And of course, it is doing that and has been all along. Nonetheless, the propagandists and legacy media and leftist politicians the world over declared that South Africa had won a major victory to end Israel's response to Hamas, even though the court specifically did not direct Israel to commit to a ceasefire. Now, of course, this victory that the leftist and the ANC politicians claimed is pure fantasy, one now that even diehard fanatical ANC supporters have to concede is false, as evidenced by the ANC's latest efforts to pretend that they actually care about human rights. The ANC is fond of telling people that is what it's all about. They're against genocide, they're against human rights abuses. Yet the African National Congress did not bother to file an amicus brief in support of the Gambia when it set the precedent for taking Myanmar to the ICJ for genocide back in 2019. On that genocide of the Rohingya, the ANC was strangely silent. It's also silent on the genocide being committed against the Uyghurs, Muslims, in China. Silent on human rights abuses in Tigray, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and a host of African conflict and state atrocities over the past several years, all while tacitly supporting Robert Gabriel Mugabe and ZANU-PF's human rights abuses in neighboring Zimbabwe. The truth is the ANC does not care about genocide or human rights. Well, that is unless it is to help their fellow liberation-era travelers. Now, according to the Hamas Health Ministry officials in Gaza, at least 28,576 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 69,000 wounded since Israel began its offensive, they claim, on October 7th. But of course, that claim is a lie in and of itself. Israel did not attack Gaza on October 7th. That's when Hamas terrorized civilians in Israel. The IDF began its ground offensive when it entered Gaza on October 27th, 3 weeks after the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Now, for his part, Israel's president said the following: "The world can't disregard what we saw on October 7th. The International Court of Justice has ignored most of these crimes, but we in Israel can't. The free world must not forget that the crimes against humanity in this war were perpetrated and continue to be perpetrated by Hamas and its allies in Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iran." South African case brought in support of Hamas is a blood libel against the nation state of the Jewish people, a shameful low for an international system that emerged from the ashes of the Holocaust. This abandonment of moral clarity, the desertion of the vision of international justice, and its replacement by cynical politics and outright falsehoods will have repercussions far beyond Israel. Isaac Herzog, president of Israel. And he's absolutely correct. This conduct by the South African government is reprehensible and misrepresenting what has been happening in Gaza. Make no mistake, the deaths of civilians is horrific in Gaza. But it is not a consequence of Israel launching a war against Palestinians. It is in response to terrorists butchering, murdering, maiming, kidnapping, raping, executing, slaughtering innocent civilians, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Israelis, foreign nationals from around the world, including other Muslims and other Arabs. Yet the world remains largely silent. No one calling for sanctions against Hamas or removal of their officials or regime change in Gaza. Has anyone uttered regime change even once, other than Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that Hamas must be exterminated. South Africa has done a grave injustice to the concept of international justice with this case before the ICJ and should be ashamed of itself while it sits silent over the Uyghurs, the Rohingya, Tigray, and a host of other horrific acts around the world, pretending and puffing out its chest that it cares about human rights abuses, when in fact, that's not what it's about. The South Africans were indoctrinated, inculcated with the values of the sick, twisted political left during the liberation era, when no one would give them succor and refuge except communists and socialists who hate humans in Cuba, the Soviet Union, China, and other wackadoodle countries. South Africa is wrong. They should rescind their case and apologize for wasting the court's time. Thanks for tuning in, folks. God bless and be safe.